Hey, welcome to episode 6 of Lead and Win the Room. I'm Russ Patterson, and in this episode, I'm going to tell you how you can lean into 3 superpowers that I bet you didn't know you already had. But if you're able to master these, you will win every room that you walk into. And the best part is, anybody can use these superpowers. Everyone has them. All you need is the courage to use them. If you get this right, your approach will actually make the burden of leadership lighter. Are you ready to learn about your superpowers? Well, this episode's called Unleashing Your Superpowers to Lead Boldly and Win Every Room. I'm Russ Patterson, and this is the Lead and Win the Room podcast. Many of us create undue stress for ourselves by trying to fit ourselves into some kind of mold of leadership that we bought into along the way, and trying to be the leader that we think we're supposed to be instead of just being ourselves. This isn't just exhausting, it's counterproductive, in fact. Like, ask yourself, how much lighter would your leadership burden be if instead of coming to work and trying to perform as if you were an actor in a play who's playing the part of a leader, you led by just being yourself? And how much more engaged might your team be if you gave them the respect of communicating with them transparently and honestly? The 3 superpowers I'm going to talk about in this episode are humility, transparency, and authenticity. And these are all 3 specialized flavors of honesty, which is the mother of all leadership superpowers. Humility is honesty about who you are, and transparency is honesty about the context and the situation. And authenticity, the 3rd superpower, is about being honest about your personal truth. And it comes from having the courage to be vulnerable and say the things that really need to be said, even though they might be difficult. So those are the 3 superpowers: humility, transparency, and authenticity. And let's double click on each of those, starting with humility. Humility is about being honest about who you are. It comes from having the strength and self-confidence such that you're not trying to prove anything to anybody, and you're not wasting any of your own energy trying to seek approval or validation for your own abilities or achievements. Humility allows you to be generous in crediting others, and it allows you to be courageous in owning your own mistakes and your own shortcomings. Transparency is about being honest about the state of your business, even if the state of your business is challenging. You know, it's important, obviously, to always radiate confidence and optimism, but it's possible to do that while still being honest about any tough circumstances that the business or your team might be facing. Leading is not cheerleading. You know, too many leaders communicate in this overly polished way through rose-colored glasses. Everything's great all the time. Everybody's super excited to be here, and we don't really talk about the things that aren't going well very much. And, you know, this kind of overly polished communication style that so many leaders and so many businesses seem to rely on, it starts to ring hollow with employees after a while. Team meetings, if you're not careful, will become this thing where you pretend everything's going great and your employees pretend to believe you. And if you build your culture on this kind of disingenuous communication, then what you're going to get is disingenuous engagement from your employees, false loyalty. I've carried businesses through some extremely challenging circumstances before, and there's always this fear that if you're honest about a tough situation, that, you know, all your best people are going to start jumping ship and leaving. But I have found that the opposite is true. If you're honest and transparent about the challenges that you face, well, that builds engagement and loyalty, and it works because your employees aren't stupid, right? They know the difference between shit and shinola, and when you're giving them truth, they can tell and they respond favorably to it because you are respecting them by trusting them with the truth. And that's making them feel like an extended part of your leadership team. That brings us to authenticity. Authenticity is the most powerful of these three superpowers. It is honesty with an exponent. Authentic conversations are the kind of conversations that make the hair on the back of your neck stand up a little bit. It's not necessarily an everyday thing. It is about sharing truth that requires courage. And maybe the best way to explain the power of authenticity in leadership to you would be for me to share a story about eBay Inc.'s former chief executive officer, John Donahoe. So I was working at eBay when John started, and if I'm honest, I didn't like him. John had to make some tough decisions when he came on board. The business was not in good shape, so he had to close a number of offices. He had to thin out the herd and let a lot of people go, including a lot of my friends. And what made it worse for me was John communicated with us in this highly polished and totally forgettable way. To me, he came across as kind of an empty suit. And then something happened. And if I remember correctly, I think John was just coming back from a sabbatical. And the context was a leadership eBay meeting. So they'd flown everybody from around the world who was director level and up to a rented auditorium in San Jose, California. There was over 3,000 people, I think, in the room at the time. And what had happened was that John had decided during his sabbatical to communicate with us differently and going forward to present the real John. So he came on stage and he talked about the challenges of taking on the role of chief executive officer of eBay in the first place, of having to move his family across the country, of trying to tackle these very difficult decisions right out of the gate, of closing offices and letting people go, and of getting death threats and hate mail from sellers who didn't like platform changes that were happening. We were hanging on John's every word. He'd never spoken to us like this before. And you could tell that what you were hearing was truth. And it did make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. John then went on to tell us about his own spectacular case of imposter syndrome and how his morning ritual is to look in the mirror and see himself looking back and just say, "You fucking fraud," and then get on with it. Get on with the challenge of being the leader that eBay needed to be. This was just so compelling, so spellbinding. This was a kind of leadership and a kind of communication that we'd never heard or experienced from John before. And I came to admire John greatly in that moment and from that moment forward. And it was so powerful and transformational that it changed the way I thought about how I needed to go about my role as a leader. Okay, so there's your three special flavors of honesty that are your superpowers that you can use as a leader if you have the courage to do it. Humility, transparency, and authenticity. Everyone has the power to be direct and honest. You don't necessarily need a lot of charisma to make these work. That's what's so fantastic about them. You just need to be real. You just need to be you. Imagine how much lighter your burden might be if you can go to work every day and just be yourself and not be trying to do this performative thing, like I said earlier, where you're taking on your role as if you're an actor in a play. That's exhausting and it doesn't help. What helps build better engagement and loyalty from your employees is if they meet the real person. They'll know. They'll know when you're being honest and transparent and direct and authentic and when you carry yourself with humility. And I'm telling you, it is the biggest unlock you might ever come across. This is such a powerful tip. I hope you have the courage to try to make this change, or to think about how you might adapt your leadership style to be more effective using these three things. This has been Lead and Win the Room, and I'm Russ Patterson.